Good evening, chocolate. Good evening, chocolate people. How y'all doing? This is your host, AJ Jones, and welcome to the Chocolate Life. How y'all doing out there in the Cocoa verse? All right. So, right now, right now, today's episode, we're gonna cover a lot of topics. There's a lot of stuff going on in the media in the world that it relates to the Cocoa verse directly and indirectly. And it's kind of interwoven a little bit. And we're going to talk about those things. We really are. So, we're going to talk about this global wake up call. Yes. Well, in this global wake up call, in the US, if you really sit and think about it, is still very segregated, even though we're not in segregation. Um, in every major city like New York, Miami, San Francisco, you got Chinatown, or you have little Asia town where you have different other nationalities from Asia. You got the Thais living together, you got the Hmong living in Vietnamese, you got the Filipinos, you know, you know, every the most segregated city in the US is probably Chicago. Like, if you can think of a country, those countries have their own little piece of town, you know. And so let's just jump off into it. So more and more younger people are seeing everything that is going on with the US and what is going on with Israel. And one thing that I would say my age group and younger are not doing, they're totally not buying into um they're not buying what the media is putting out there. And part of the reason one reason is we live in an information age, and depending on where you are in the world, you know, everywhere you are in the world, there's some history of that part of the world. And then if you are a part of the history of that area, or the people, or you are part of a group of people that are native to an area, you're going to have a lot of facts and a lot of truth that you are going to be privy to that most people aren't. And in having that information, it's when you get new information, you already hold. Let me go back for a minute. Okay, so when you go to school, you're going to learn a lot of different information. And when you learn that information, um hold on. I'm sorry about that, everybody. Got some technical stuff going on right quick. We're going to take a quick pause for the calls right quick. I'm back. So, like, when you go to school, you're going to learn a lot of information that are flooded and put in these curriculums. And then I had the misfortune. I'm not going to say misfortune. Hold up. I'm not going to call it that. I'm going to, you know what? I can call it the greatest, most positive misfortune that could have ever happened. So what happened was I'm one of those people that actually love history and geography. That those are two subjects I really, really love. I love social studies. I love learning about people. I love learning about other places and learning about the history. So I get to college, and the first class I ever took was history of civilization, and it was taught by a guy by the name of Dr. Miller. And this dude comes in and says, "Hey, I'm finna unlearn all. You finna unlearn all the BS that you learn from 12th grade. I mean, from kindergarten through 12th, and I'm finna change your life." And I'm like, "What in the world?" And I just could not believe it. I just could not believe. I was like, "What in the world?" I'm like, this dude is really putting out this information. And this dude not only gave you the information, but he gave you context to which from which the information came. And also he gave you like he gave you the context, then he gave you the background of the information, and then what the very thing that you thought you knew about a certain subject in history when we were, I'm going to say the first few chapters, everything we thought we knew about the Aztecs, Incas, Mayans, Olmecs, you know what I'm saying? And even going up through California, Navajo, everything we thought we knew, oh snap, we've been lied to, we've been hoodwinked. And when you get that new information, you know what I'm saying? When you get that new information, you really start questioning stuff, and it's like a domino effect. Okay, this is connected to this. This didn't make sense to me for a reason. Now I know why. And then you go to the next thing and the next thing and the next. And so, now, even when it comes to the history of this country and how we get in and fit in, like the way that I see it and view it, people can't, it is impossible for someone to tell me that, it is impossible for someone to try to tell me differently without the facts. And so, and that's one thing that the younger generation isn't afraid of. And I'm not just talking about here, I'm just talking about around the world. Like, the younger people are like, yo, wrong is wrong. Uh, wrong is wrong. This stuff that's happening over here is wrong. And then on top of that, there are younger people that are slowly putting together, like, wait a minute, this looks familiar for some crazy reason. Like, this looks familiar. You know what I'm saying? Like, this almost looks like, pre-Civil War slavery, where those killing black folks up like it was nothing. You know what I'm saying? This, this looks familiar. You know what I'm saying? Wait a minute, this looks like apartheid. You know what I'm saying? Like everything, the younger people are slowly putting two and two together to get forward, and it's making sense. Like, and one thing that I have, one thing that I have trouble with is one thing that I have trouble with is old elders. Yeah, okay, you have olders and elders. Olders are just older people that are just trying to be comfortable, live good, and not really try to help us as a culture. Elders, they are the older people and the experience that are trying to help us as a whole. That's the difference between an older and an elder. Now, I took that from Tariq Nasheed. Um, so uh, so the older crowd, they don't like it when when younger people come up with information and they're standing 10 toes down. And so when they don't like it when young people come up with new information, new concepts, new whatever, and they're 10 toes down with it, they, for whatever reason, it's almost like they feel like it almost feels like whatever control or power or whatever they feel, it's almost like they feel it slipping away. And it should feel like that for good reason, because people are not people were not created to be controlled anyway. But that's a whole nother conversation. That's just different. um but for you know people are literally seeing, like, people are seeing the genocide for what it is. They are literally on an extermination tour right now over there. And because people have painted Israel as the chosen group and the chosen people for so long, they really have no idea what they're saying and doing. And also they're following narratives that have been passed mainly through the Bible. They're you know they're just passing those same narratives along and not even questioning them. And that's kind of bad for, I'm not going to say it's kind of bad for business. It is bad for business. And let's just be honest about it. So um more and more, us as black people are slowly are kind of are it's almost like our voice on any matter, especially if it's concerning stuff overseas like Israel or Palestine, or not necessarily that we stand with, like, okay, it's almost like here in the US, because of the media, everybody in Palestine is automatically pegged as a Muslim or a villain. And that's not even the case, because most of the Israelis are not even traditional Jews. They're Zionists. And they don't even they're not even yeah. And if you really look up what a Zionist is, it's a if you really look up what a Zionist is, like, it will change your mindset. If you really okay, so like if you really look up what a Zionist is, perfect example, a supporter of Zionism, a person who believes in the development and protection of a Jewish nation in what is now known as Israel. Or second definition, now this is the noun definition, a member of any group of independent churches which practice a form of Christianity incorporating elements of African beliefs. Now, that is from the Oxford Dictionary. Now, let's look at Wikipedia's definition. A movement that emerged in the 19th century enabled an establishment of a homeland of Jewish people in Palestine, a region roughly corresponding to the land of Israel in Jewish tradition. Following the establishment of Israel, Zionism became the ideology that supports the development and protection of the state of Israel. Theodore Hezri, the founder of modern Zionist movement, 1896. Now, it doesn't say anything. Now, if you really look at the other definition, if you look at the Oxford Dictionary definition, I'm going to roll with definition number 2. Independent churches which practice a form of Christianity incorporate elements of traditional African beliefs. Zionism is a nationalist movement that emerged in the 19th century that enabled the establishment of the homeland of Jewish people in Palestine. It's a nationalist movement. It's not even a religion. Which, yeah, it's not even a religion, but it's a movement. Zionism. And so there's 2 things we have to really need to drive home. And we spoke about me and Chaplain C, or me and Chaplain K. We talked about this last week. Everybody that's Palestinian is not Muslim. Everybody that is Palestinian is not Muslim. Everybody that is Israeli is not a traditional Jew. Everybody that is, most of the people that are Israeli, if they are not Orthodox Jew, I'm talking from a religious sense. If they are not Orthodox Jew, they are Zionists. Period. If they're not Orthodox Jew, they are Zionists. And if they're not Zionists, they are some form of Protestant Christian in some way, shape, or form. Get it? Now, because of the way the media pushes things, when people say Hamas, everybody automatically thinks Palestine, Muslim. And as soon as somebody says Israel, they automatically think Israeli, Jew, Hebrew. And that's not even it. Once people finally understand that those layers are layers for a reason, and once you understand those reasons why there are layers, it's going to make more sense. And so so there are a lot of Black people who are on different platforms that are pretty much saying, hey, this is a genocide. This looks real familiar. Remember, this happened in South Africa. This has been happening all over the continent. You know what I'm saying? It's happened all over the continent. You know, in the beginning stages of this country, you know what I'm saying? It's the same. I was like, this happened with them moving this is the same thing. That they moved the natives off their land. Like, it's the same thing, same playbook, different people, different countries, same channel. We are looking at the same regularly scheduled program. Who are these people? And so a lot of these people on these platforms are calling it out. Now, with a lot of us people in the chocolate in the cocoa verse speaking on it, absolutely. Religious Jews is an assumption on American Zionist part. Religious talk is a distraction, not helpful, and a waste of time. I totally agree. If anything, it's dividing people. Totally true. Totally true. Where was I at? Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. With more and more people speaking out and calling on it, it's almost like, and one thing I'm slowly starting to see, it's almost like the established media is trying to stay ahead of people on platforms like, the different podcasting platforms, YouTube, Podbean, Zencaster, Anchor, Blog Talk Radio, things of that nature. People are speaking out with factual information, and it's almost like, and the crazy part about it, the people in the established media, it's almost like they're listening to us. Well, I'm not gonna say us. They're listening to everyone who is talking about these things, and it's almost like they're taking notes, and then okay, how do we flip this? How do we jump on that? And that's what they're doing. Perfect example. Is conversation should separate the Jewish people. Absolutely. Yes. Um, um, yes, and also, um, uh, the chaplain is chiming in from the chat, and basically she pointed out that conversations on Israelis should separate the Jewish people from the government of Netanyahu, which is very, 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 very true. And I was I was just thinking earlier how if you really look at every group of people, there's always that one person that hates the group that they're in, and they try to big themselves up to dominate another group. It's always that one person, and he's that one guy. He's one of those guys. And and if you really sit and think about even the different, like, okay, so this is symbol. Yes. And I actually was talking about that earlier. Younger people, mainly high school, college age, I'll say between age 14 to 24, if they're in school and they're taking history classes, like when it's almost like, wait a minute, this sounds really, really familiar. But the thing that kind of throws most people off is the wording and how it's presented. And so I've taken so much history. You can look in the news at what's going on right now, and my brain's like, okay, this looks familiar. Bam. This is what happened to the Aboriginal people. And who pushed them out? The US. The Israelis are doing the exact same thing. It's the same playbook, just used by a different team, different head coach. The coaches don't even know each other, but it's the same playbook. Same playbook. Like, there's nothing original about what is happening. Okay. And then I was thinking about something earlier. I was just thinking, okay, why most Americans aren't seeing this? Why most Americans aren't seeing that the conflict in Palestine isn't being viewed as a genocide or apartheid. So right now, a lot of the country, mainly, I'm gonna mainly touch on I'm gonna mainly touch on the people that are late 60s, early 70s. Well, let's just say late 60s up. I'm gonna say 65. I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say 60. I'm just gonna say mid 60s and up. All right. So they're old enough to remember apartheid. And then on top of that, they're also old enough to remember Jim Crow and segregation in this country. And so I remember, I am now old enough to remember black college students, mainly at HBCUs, divesting because of, or calling for divesting when it came to apartheid and stuff like that. So the problem that I have with the older generation right now, being that they went through the stuff they went through and it's not as bad as it was, it's almost like they've gotten comfortable. And also, the leaders that they had back during that time were the leaders that they had during that time. You the Martin Luther Kings, the Malcolm X's, Marcus, Marcus Garvey's, Stokely Carmichael's, you know. Now let's just say the big leaders at the top, Malcolm and Martin. All right, so these elders are old enough to remember those people, but for some crazy reason, when stuff like this is happening across the world, it's almost like they want to turn a blind eye, because it's almost like, oh man, it hurts too much. I went through that when I was a little kid, or when I was a teen, or when I was in my 20s. I'm not trying to look at that again. But at the same time, you're kind of like standing idly by as you watch genocide happen live in front of you on TV. And it's kind of hard to not make the comparison, because it's happening the exact same. Like I said earlier, it's the same playbook used by a different coach, different team, same plays. The goal is to start telling our own narrative, not Sleepy Biden. He may be the head of state, but he does not. And that's another thing that has to be addressed. We, as a group, cannot depend on the people in DC. Not Sleepy Joe Biden, not Uncle Ruckus Clyburn, not Willie Brown side chick Harris. None of them. We can't depend on any of them. We not gonna say kind of, we have to take care of this stuff on our own. No questions asked, no ifs, ands, buts about it. We have to do it ourselves. And we have to be self-sufficient, because I often sit and think about how the previous generation that is slowly dying off, the people that are, late 70s, 80s, 90s, and their parents, they did just as much, if not more, with less. But for whatever reason, in 2023, why can't we really, really just take hold of part of the reason is our country is so divided, even within the community. And there's just been so much done. As far as that concerned. You had people sending drugs into the community. You got people dropping guns off. Even during the pandemic, you had people just randomly dropping pallets of bricks off in the freaking hood or in the middle of the big city. And it wasn't just Chicago. It was Minneapolis. It was Indianapolis. It was Milwaukee. It was it was Dallas. It was Dallas, Fort Worth. Like, a friend of mine from college literally went live during a march. And while they were marching, a big white truck, it was a big white box truck. He took a pause for the cause. Mind you, this is in Fort Worth. And during this same march, another one of a classmates from college who was a pastor was marching and got stopped and got arrested and stuff. So while the other classmate was getting stopped and getting arrested, he was kind of farther back in the line. So this dude's on an overpass. This dude literally watched a box truck of people dressed in all black pull a pallet of cinder blocks. I want to say it looked like cinder blocks and bricks. Pulled it out of the box truck and dropped it off on this corner. Those guys got back in the truck and then drove up maybe about 4, maybe 5 lights, and then dropped another one off, and then took a left and drove off. And I'm like, man, this is wild. And it's just stuff like that. You got different outside. You have different outside entities like the CIA or any government entities, any initials, 3 or 4 letter initial groups. They're doing things in the neighborhood or in the community to keep us divided, or keep the Cocoverse divided. And another thing that has happened is that colonization and colonization has produced a rift between the chocolate people on the continent and the chocolate people over here. And more and with everybody traveling more and more and interacting, then you have this information age. Like, people are putting things together. And the good thing right now, you have a lot of these young African leaders that are like, hey, it's about us. We're gonna get this thing popping. We're gonna get our thing straight. I'm gonna talk with my brothers on the borders connected to me so we can get some stuff worked out. And people are not really liking that. And it's almost like, and then the West and then like the big countries like the US, the Englands, and Europe, like, they're so freaking greedy. Like, everything we do as far as getting together, it's almost like they're like, dang, they talking about this together junk again. Like, we can't have this happen because this is not going to be profitable for us. We have to put us first. We can't be diving in other folks' calls. We can't be helping everybody with their stuff. We got to get our stuff popping off. We got to be this. It is our turn as the Cocoverse to be selfish. We need to build our own chocolate empire, baby. We need, forget chocolate cities. It's chocolate world now. Contrary to popular belief. Most people do know this. Some people don't. Well, a lot of people don't. 2/3 of the planet is chocolate people. Now, there are people that are chocolate people that don't believe they're chocolate people. But, colonization has a way of, messing folks up in the head. And so, oh yeah, I gotta bring this up. So there's a game within the side. There's a game inside of the game that a lot of people are not talking about. And I was listening to a certain channel as I was eating. And some people know that I hate this channel with a passion, but sometimes this channel just happens to pass out nuggets, even when it's not trying to. So, on the channel earlier, they were talking about, hey, we have to destroy Hamas. We have to use these things called, what do they call them? Bunker busters. and then we need to send our National Guard to our southern border, and then we need to do this and take out. We had to do this. We got to take on all. We got to put Palestine in a all blackout, in a total blackout, and then we got to go. We got to put some sanctions on Iran, and we're like, hey, you guys need to chill out because we need your oil. And I'm like, wait a minute. You guys are still messing around with these folks over oil, and we have our own. And to make matters worse, you got this old guy just randomly just shelling out billions to other countries, and then telling the people in his own country, hey, your tax dollars are working for a good cause. And it's just not making sense. So some people, I've heard some people even, and then retired former Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North had just said everything that I said earlier. And the thing that got my attention, he said, hey, you guys need to chill out. We need your oil. And he was referring to Iran. Now, my question is this conflict over there a ploy for us to low-key get some boots on the ground, to slowly, low-key make a move on Tehran and Iran to get the oil? Because that's what it sounded like, because the Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North himself said it on national TV. Like, that's what he said on national TV. There's a game behind the game. And then on top of that, how does, and somebody else asked me the question, one of my homeboys asked me, he was like, for some crazy reason, I have a funny feeling that Russia has a small tie in all of this. And I didn't quite know where he was going, but he kind of gave a little context. I'm like, I don't know, bro. I don't know. My question is, even to that, does Russia and Iran have any ties? That is my question. Does Russia and Iran have any ties? Because if they do, that answers a whole lot of questions. And if something is to go down, in a way, is the U.S. hoping something goes down? Because it would benefit them financially? Now, I'm not wishing World War III on anybody, but the U.S., it's almost like the more and more history I learn, and even being in the military and seeing how things tie together, how we view certain countries, like everything that's happening right now is a smaller chess move leading to a bigger checkmate down the line. This checkmate might be a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, a whole decade. But at the same time, during that process, we have got to come together and work together. That really should be our main objective right now. And I'm not just talking black people in America. I'm talking about black people in general, chocolate people in general, chocolate people around the world. Like, we need to be networking. Like, I'm a firm believer in people who are working in corporate America, who are in that daily grind, working a job where they're not being valued in a company, making somebody else thousands upon millions upon billions upon trillions. And my whole thing is, a lot of America, a lot of chocolate American folks have never been out of the country. So them even thinking about coming here is almost like they can't see themselves doing it because, America just has certain amenities that a lot of countries in Africa and South America and Asia don't. Now, now there are a lot of people from here in there are a lot of people that are from the States that have intelligence and training and gifts and skills that could help the continent a million times over. And it just takes a group of them at a time going to the continent. It just takes a group at a time. Just a little small group at a time. But those small groups will be very, 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 very powerful. And that's what we need. We need the little small groups to get together and stay together. Like, it is survival mode. It is DEFCON 5 mode. Like this is the top level of survival, And the one thing that is bothering me, that it just bakes my brain. I was joking about it, or I was talking about it, but serious at the same time. But like, reparations are warranted across the board, period, for the Cocoa verse. Now, these folks that are collaborators, they don't need to get a dime. They need to be off on their own, because all they've been doing is selling us up the river to, just so they can live good. Your run of the mill, everyday turncoats, the Candace Owens of the world, Roland Martin, Jesse Jackson, my perm look bad, Sharpton, when he was living, the guy that the guy that got voted out of SNCC and got mad at Stokely Carmichael because they wanted him and not Mr. Lewis, Mr. John Lewis. Like, he has done more for himself than for the community. And history is actually coming out and telling it. And I don't care who gets mad, but It's the truth. Those people who have been collaborators don't need to get a dime. Tim Scott. Mitch McConnell's boy, Cameron, up in Kentucky. They don't need to get a dime. But yeah, we need to once we get once we get those dimes, we need to put them together, because that is going to help us. See, what I'm slowly starting, and I've been watching a lot of movies lately, and I was watching this movie on Apple TV, and it's kind of this particular movie is kind of in the same vein as Selma. It's in the same vein as Selma, but it's basically showing in depth the relationship that Martin Luther King, no, I can't say the relationship, but about it's going into detail about the conversations that Lyndon Baines Johnson and Dr. Martin Luther King were having. Oh, the movie's called All the Way. And one thing that I noticed is that on different parts of the movie, you have all these senators and congressmen, all these Washington politicians in their own private meetings, and they're having conversations. And so they were looking at Bill H.R. 7152, which was the Civil Rights Act. They were looking at it as if they get this, just imagine what they'll do to us. And this is coming from people like Strom Thurmond, Jack, what's that guy's name? I cannot think of the guy's name right now. But their whole thing was, imagine what they'll do to us. Imagine what they'll do to us. And in a statement like that, when somebody is saying, and the thing that I'm thinking about the most is that when you hear an all white conversation talking to someone, especially about change, they don't want that change to take place. And then the first thing they hit you with, imagine what they'll do to us. So their fear is, the assumption is that they will lose all their power, all their government, all their laws that they've had to control us for so long. They automatically assume that we're going to get power and this and that, and we're going to do the same thing to them. And unfortunately, that's not how us chocolate people are built. That's a misconception and that's a misconception and an assumption based off of their own guilt for what they know they have done. Remember, this movie is literally taking place between 1964 and 65. And so basically they're showing they're literally talking about the time between the Civil Rights Act being, leading up to the Civil Rights Act being, the Civil Rights Act happening, and then also the Voters' Rights Act happening a year later. So that's what they're on. They're assuming we're going to come at them. And we could care less, honestly. And I think that is all this week on the Chocolate Life podcast. Chocolate people, be safe, be ready, be vigilant. Because if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. Holla if you hear me. And be blessed, chocolate people. This is your host from the Chocolate Life. This is your host, AJ Jones. I wish you peace and Godspeed.